Today on a couple of Pointers podcasts, we're lucky enough to have Justin Hackston from Dooley. Welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks, Ricky. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh, man, I've been looking forward to talking to you for a long time. You were one of the SDRs that I often turn to for some advice or for some feedback because you were just on the ground, grinding, and I could tell, like, this guy knows his stuff. He really knows his stuff. So tell me, your current role though, not an SDR.
No, just made the transition literally a few weeks ago to the AE role. There's tons to learn. There's tons I learned as an SDR, and now I'm in my AE role, and it's back to learning again, and it's a lot different than what I'm used to. So it's exciting.
Talk about that career for a second, right? Firstly, why did you get into the SDR role?
To be honest with you, I got into the SDR role. Literally, I did not know what I wanted to do. Spent a few years in the British Army, left, moved to Canada, and went to uni, right? Because I didn't go to uni before joining the Army. Went back to university, thought I'd figure it out, and did a few odd jobs here and there, and just thought, what else can I do? Okay, sales, do sales. And when I looked into it, it looked like a lot of people it was a really good career. So I literally did not ever think that I'd be a salesperson. I never thought that I was any good at talking to people, especially being on the phones. Now I'm doing it every day and I love it. It's great. Amazing.
Tell me, do you think any of your military training helped you with sales?
I don't know. I think people ask me that quite a bit. What did you learn in the Army that you in the civilian world and in sales? The typical answer might be discipline, of course, right? You need to have the discipline and the grit, right? You need to be comfortable doing difficult things and doing those difficult things when nobody's watching, right? A lot of us SDRs are working at home and we don't have a manager looking at us like we would if we were in the Army. So you have to be your own manager, right? And I think that has helped me.
Now, I guess starting off as an SDR, like many do, most are failing, right? The vast majority are failing. Yeah. What's your advice? It comes to you, hey, I want to become an SDR. I'm looking to get into tech sales. I think I'm being an SDR or BDR or whatever you want to call it these days. What's your go-to advice?
Yeah, I have these conversations quite a bit with SDRs and just connecting. And like you said, a lot of people are failing, especially right now in the economy. It's hard to generate pipeline. Let's be real about it, regardless of which company you work for. And I felt that myself, right? And I've been there. I would say, obviously, you know this by now, you need to do your research on the company that you're going to work for, right? And especially for somebody looking to break into tech, a lot of us are just trying to break in to any company. But what I see is that there's a lot of people with a lot of potential. We all have potential, right? I believe that you got to land at a very good company, because I see a lot of people. It's no secret that a lot of people young in their sales career, they start a sales career and then they realize, oh, this isn't for me. And been there, I felt that. Can't tell you how many times that I said, hey, if this isn't going to work, I'm just going to go back and join the Army, or I'll become a firefighter.
Yeah, become a firefighter. It's good training. I think if I was an SDR at the moment trying to land a job, I don't know what I would do, right? Because companies are hiring just SDRs as if it's part of their short-term variable expenses. I could hire them this week, see if they work, fire them next week. And so there's a lot of risk involved. And on top of that, the way people come up with targets for SDRs it just blows my mind. It's like a thumbsuck. It's like wishful thinking. Do you send your people to RepView, one of those sites where they can kind of see what percentage of people are on targets?
RepView, that's where I go for any sort of information I need, and that's what I recommend.
That is amazing. I saw there was someone who had a job offer, a very nice job offer. It was $300,000 was the on-target earnings. And I think it was a 50-50 split. So it was 150 base, 300 on targets. They had another offer from another company that was 125 base, 250 on targets. And they're like, the 300 one looks better. But when they actually dug into it, the company at 300 had 40% of their reps on targets, and their top earner was earning 700,000, and the company at 250 had 85% of their reps on targets, and their top earner was earning 1.2 million. Yeah. You have to get into the details of the company to know where you want to work. Tell me, coming in from the Army, you came with whatever skills you had discipline, you had grit, but you certainly didn't have a fucking cold call script locked down. What skills did you have to develop super quickly for you to be successful in the role?
Cold calling. That was the number one thing for me.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, I hated being on the phones. I remember growing up, like the phone rang at my mom's shop, I would like intentionally try not to get somebody else to pick it up. But even in the army, being on the radio, I hated being on the radio. But the nice thing about the army is that everything you say is with the least possible amount of words.
Yeah.
And there's very direct in your communication style. So learning to be conversational, learning how to chat with people, that was a little bit different for me because being in the army, we were very direct, and I always appreciated that approach because we always knew exactly what we needed to do and when. And there was no fluff, if you will. So I needed to learn how to be on the phones, be comfortable on the phones.
Now when you pick up a phone, you got a call block, you're going to call for an hour. Is there still a sense of dread?
Sometimes there is. It's a Monday morning. Not a sense of dread. There's that feeling inside, the phone's ringing, you can hear it dialing. Who's going to pick up on the other side? Is it going to be somebody who's going to be terrible? And it never really is, right? At least for me, it isn't. You know, call people and have a conversation. So what helped me a lot is this is my mindset, is just thinking, okay, take it back. When I first became an SDR and I love to read, right? So I started reading a lot of books on sales. And I think one of the first ones was Objection Handling by, I can't remember the author right now, but I read some of Grant Cardone's stuff too. And I thought, objection handling, I need to get really good at this if I'm going to book meetings.
Yeah.
But, and that sort of overwhelmed me, and I wanted to always have a rebuttal for anything that somebody said. And it didn't really go well. Now my approach is I'm just jumping on a call to have a genuine conversation with the person on the other end. That's it.
Yeah.
A genuine conversation.
Yeah, I see that. Because objections aren't something to be overcome. They're just something to be understood.
Exactly.
So calling, you think probably the number one skill you had to develop coming in as an SDR. What else? Tell me a few more skills that you've developed that you feel like if you weren't able to master, you would have failed.
Yeah, I would say is really mastering the technology you have, because it's extremely powerful. Whatever it is you're using, Sales Nav, any sort of sales engagement platform, or any data provider, there's so much that you can do with it, and it's so powerful. That has helped me in my role. I have my sales hat, but I also have to have my sales ops hat. And I have to do that for myself. So understanding your technology and learning how to leverage it, and you using it the way you want to use it and not the way that it makes you use it.
Now, this makes me think. So I know I've spoken to you before. We got a tool called Salesfinity. We were testing it out. And I was like, how are you using it? And you gave me an example of how you were using it to maximize your workflow, to increase your velocity, to maximize your outcomes. And it was so interesting. It's not a way that most people choose to use it. And you just had like a chef, if you give a chef a recipe for the ingredients and then one day you come and you don't have Parmesan cheese, you might say, oh, well, you know what, I can compensate by adding a bit more salt, and I can compensate by adding a little bit more this, and you came up with something still bloody delicious. You understood every element of your workflow and why it was there. So when you needed to add a different ingredient to it, you could still make something amazing. It was super impressive. I would guess, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass, I would say that you're probably one of the top Apollo experts in the world. I speak to a lot of people, and I don't think there's anyone who knows the intricacies of that platform as well as you do.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to learn it, because when I first used Apollo, I hated it. I was like, God, I get
it. It is so busy. It's hard to get to grasp of to begin with.
Yeah. And then I read Justin Michael's book, and I was like, I need to learn Apollo like the back of my hand. So now, I'm pretty good at Apollo. One of the things that we chat about that conversation that we had, right? And I think this goes back to a lot of people hire their BDRs, SDRs, but they don't really understand what that person is really doing in their day-to-day. So like for me, I'm a big problem solver. I love solving problems. I was frustrated with the workflow, right? And I just saw a lot of problems in terms of blockages in the way that it works.
Yeah.
And I never understood why these sequences, that the typical SaaS sequence that we use out there that includes omni-channel, so call, LinkedIn, and email. Why is it that if 50% of those phone numbers aren't valid, why is the SDR being asked to dial those numbers again? That's a huge time block, time waste.
Yeah.
And so I thought, so I literally was thinking this at night. I was like, it was like I couldn't sleep. I was like, I'm just going to split the sequence in two. I'm going to have my email and LinkedIn in one, and then I'm going to have my phone number in another one. That way. And then I'm going to have a first step, which is a validation step. to make sure the email doesn't bounce, to make sure the phone number is valid.
Mm-hmm.
And what would that mean? That means every time I dialed, I'm guaranteed
Right.
to have a connect.
It is like tools or companies like Phone Ready Leads. Great service, but
Yeah.
you firstly got to give them the lead. So you've got to pay $2 off Zoom info for it. Then they're going to charge you another $7 to validate that this person picks up. And it is a valuable service. For some, it's a good tool, a good resource, and can be far more effective in developing a positive ROI. Awesome, right? But you went and built this product for yourself where you could just spend an hour using a parallel dialer, not necessarily even to have conversations, just validate these numbers. And then you're not good. I've got a person who picks up the phone here. I can actually drop them in my sequence. You can have the conversation then and there if you want. But it was just brilliant. And it actually inspired me to say, we segment things at Pointer. We've got specialists for everything. We've got like specialist research, we've got specialist sales job, we've got specialist copywriters. I was like, could I take, for all of my campaigns, every single phone number that we get, could I just give it to someone whose their job is just to dial through, just validate that they pick up. Yeah, they pick up, good. This was a dead number, take it out. And then all of our SDRs just get valid numbers, or valid numbers of people who pick up, whichever one it is. And you came up with this, like just with the tool that costs $50. Like,
yeah, I'm doing it myself. Yeah,
So-
that's what I mean. You have to be a problem solver as an SDR, especially if you're not working at Pointer where you have somebody doing the research for you and you could just sell all day. That's the ideal world. If you're not working there, then you have to be a problem solver. You have to remove those blockages for yourself.
So let's look at this, right? And I think this is why you've done well as an SDR. So as an SDR, you have to come in with discipline, with resilience or grits, whatever we want to call it. You have to be a creative problem solver. You have to be a bit of a technophile because you really need to be able to maximize technology to do your job. You need to be pretty good at research.
Yes.
You need to be pretty good at writing, right? Like a real top end at writing. I've found.
Yes.
You have to be a great conversationalist. You have to be a strategic thinker in how you build your lists. If you're just looking for people who have more than 200 employees, you're like, that's not a list. Like, like we're getting to unicorn status here, right? And all of this is for a junior role, for someone who like this is their first job out of university.
There's so many hats to wear, isn't there?
Yeah. Now you've moved over to AE. Those skills that you developed as an SDR, do you think are foundational? That like you would struggle to be an effective AE without those skills?
I think right now, like an AE who can generate their own pipeline, oh man, for any company. So look, just if you have a good understanding of how to generate pipeline, right? Because there are two different jobs for two different reasons. So that's the name of the game right now. And for most of the folks that I'm chatting with, pipeline generation is where it's at. Everyone needs that right now.
Top of funnel, mate. If I was hiring an AE and the AE in the job interview came and said, hey, Ricky, look, I'm a great AE. I understand medic. I understand this. I understand closing techniques. I understand qualifications. I understand the 7 reasons why deals don't proceed. I understand, and I can do all of this. But the one thing I insist on is that from 9 till 10 o'clock every day, and from 3 till 4 o'clock every day, I have no meetings. All I do is cold call for new business. And that's the foundation of how I work and how I want to maintain working. Would you be happy with that? I'd fucking hire the person on the spot. I was just like, this is the AE we want. Right? Like every AE has to generate their own pipe. That is like the role I find the SDR doing. Yes, it's pipeline creation, but it's actually just figuring shit out on how to generate pipeline.
Yeah.
This is the kind of company that's working for us. This is the kind of list that's working for us. This is the kind of messaging so that your whole sales team can be lifted up. Like they're the reconnaissance unit of the Delta team. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, they're the boots on the ground. And I think one of the things that being having the privilege of like being an SDR at the company and then promoting to an AE is like you have a unique perspective if you've done that, because you know what a good company looks like and you can disqualify them before you even reach out to them.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
100%. Now, another topic, and this might be a little bit hairy, so stop me if we're pushing on any sensitive bits.
Cool.
The company you work for went through a bit of a tumultuous time where they had to let's just use a euphemism, they had to reorganize themselves. Let's talk for a minute around SDR leadership and SDR management and what you think good SDR management looks like and where it's critical and where it's not critical. So can you talk to me about like your experience there and how you were enabled?
Yeah, I think having a good onboarding experience, right? Learning personas, pains, and all that good stuff. But then also giving the SDR all the tools that they need to do, that they need. Ideally sequences, right? That's a very core component that an SDR needs. So you need to have really good sequences for your SDRs, and you need to train them on those sequences. You can't just say, hey, here are the sequences, off you go. You need to walk them through it. So that's a core component. And then also you need to walk them through every step of it, right? So that when that new SDR hits the ground, they can hit the ground running. So they know exactly what they need to do, when they need to do it, and how. And the important part is how, because if you don't teach them how, then they're going to have to go and figure out how, and then they won't hit quota. They'll be frustrated because they don't understand how they're doing it. So I think standardization across a company is very important. Standardization is super important for an SDR. If you have your sales reps doing different things, then how are you going to know what's working and what's not? How are you going to onboard somebody?
And it's so common, right? We work with companies that, have 5 or 6 AEs, and they're using different technologies to get the job done. All doing it completely different. They may all be hitting quota, but it's very frustrating for a sales leader then who's trying to make a change and you don't have a homogenous sales culture. It's very hard to bring in that change and look for those improvements. I'm a firm believer that SDRs succeed because of good SDR leadership. Like, to just stick someone on their first job on Apollo and say, like, we're trying to sell to these people, go. And that's 70% that actually have leadership. If you're not given good sales management, the likelihood of you succeeding is just fucking next to nothing. Eventually you'd become autonomous, but not for the first 6 months.
And you hear a lot, I hear people say, just tell them the pains. And then have them, just tell them the pains and have them go and hit the phones and start sending emails. And I'm just like, nah. That is not the way. Like, you need to train these people. You need to train. I think a lot of companies underestimate the impact that training can have on their organization.
So tell me now, you were a top performing SDR at the peak, right? You figured out the technology, you figured out cold calling, you figured out messaging. You came from a good history where they had good SDR management and leadership who was also like really trying to figure shit out and homogenize stuff. How many sequences, like you selling one product, how many sequences are you actively running?
For me, a lot of the sequences were persona-based sequences with, of course, pain that the typical persona that you're reaching out to would experience.
So primarily the difference between sequence 1 for persona A and sequence 2 for persona B, would it be the same cadence, just different messaging?
That's a really good question. I think it should be different, but I think it needs to be figured out. Like, you need to test and see what works for different.
All right, so now for a single persona, just persona A, how many different sequences do you typically have for that one persona?
Ideally, you would have your persona-based sequences and then your trigger-based sequences, right? What are the different triggers you're looking for? And if you can't find those triggers, then you just add them to a persona-based sequence. And for me, what I did is I had, for my 2 persona-based sequences, that's really what I was using a lot. I would have 2 persona-based sequences. What I mean by that is I would have an automated cadence and then also a personalized. And I did that. I had personalized sequences for tier 1 accounts, and maybe for tier 2s, and then tier 3s, I would put them in an automated, right?
So the same persona, right? We're going after CROs, whatever it is. We've got tier 1s or tier 2s or whatever into sequence A, which is manual steps. We've got tier 2 or tier 3, depending where you define it, into the automated steps or less manual, maybe less call intensive, whatever it might be. You then got trigger sequences, right? So new CRO to the role, recently received funding. How many different trigger-based sequences do you currently have?
So for me right now I use about 2 or 3. So hiring for AEs or a post, because a lot of the people that I reach out to post on LinkedIn, right? So if I see a relevant post that I could use in the messaging, I'll use that. And then also if I speak to one of their sales reps, I'll have a personalized sequence for that.
Oh, so that's a trigger. Spoke to someone in your team.
Yeah.
Awesome trigger. I really like that. Then do you have sequences for follow-ups, for meeting booked, for no-shows? Like where else are you using sequences or just doing stuff manually?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to do. I'm not there yet, but that's the ideal place I'd like to be, is popping them into a sequence if there's a no-show or a meeting book. But I'm not there yet, but that's the ideal world. If I could have all the sequences I could have, it would include those for sure.
All right. Those are very difficult to do, by the way, because the one thing about those meeting booked or no-shows is it's very dependent on a date of when the meeting was.
Yeah.
And none of the tools really integrate so well. Even if you're using Apollo to book Apollo or Outplay to book Outplay, the date doesn't dynamically update in the prospect. So if they reschedule, then they're still going to get their meeting booking notifications for the original date. Never seen anything that does it well.
What I do in that case is I just put a task inside my Google Calendar for a specific day and time, right?
Yeah.
So I have tons of tasks in my Google Calendar for follow-ups before the meeting, want to send them an email, that sort of thing. And then what I also do in my sequences is I have other sequences that are just keep in touch. So I might have a step to send this person an email or message them on LinkedIn or give them a call once a month. I have a sequence for that. Yeah.
And how often do you put people back in a sequence? So like you run them through the sequence, there were no contacts, you didn't get hold of them. Do you then try them again 6 months later or something?
I will. Absolutely. No, not 6 months. It really depends. I'll put that into my calendar as well. Feel it out. The other thing that I'll look at is what was the engagement with this sequence? If they haven't opened any emails, then why would I go and try and send them more emails in 2 months? It's not like all of a sudden they're going to be the kind of person that opens emails. So I really have to feel it out.
Interesting. Like it really sounds like you got your shit together. And I hope anyone listening to this has plucked out how well how you're using your tools to get the job done. And there's purpose behind everything. It's not just, hey, here's a sequence, add people into the sequence, make phone calls. There's an understanding of what's the right approach for this individual to convert them, to the effort it might take. And have you found that your trigger-based sequences convert at a much higher rate than your persona-based sequences?
Yes, they do.
Interesting.
Yeah. And also because they're much more personalized. There's that relevance over personalization. First of all, I don't know why anybody would send an email to somebody that wasn't relevant. Know that was happening. When I found that out, I was like, who's doing that? Stop.
It's like a matrix, like a Nash equilibrium kind of just a 2x2, where things could be personalized and irrelevant. They can be relevant and not personalized, or it can be personalized and relevant.
Yeah. I'm much more of a fan of personalized relevance, or relevant personalization, sorry, I should say. But again, like what you have to do, what you got to do, like I know a lot of people, especially on LinkedIn, they love the personalization. I saw you went on a trip to Thailand. That sounds wonderful. Let me tell you about how that trip.
Yeah, 100%. I also noticed you using Salesforce. How's about a tool that's same but different? Like it's never, it's just never quite there. Now, it's got to be personalized and it's got to be relevant. That makes so much sense. Last question for you, very, very technical. I know this. I've gone like deep into the technicals here. You have a product that was, originally like a product-led growth or a sales-assisted model, where you may have an AE download and use your tool. They hopefully getting some good benefit out of it. So you can speak to that AE. Hey, do you think the rest of your team might benefit from this? And you can sell in to the whole sales organization. Have you found, looking back on the year now, as an SDR, that your best approach has been a bottom-up approach, talking to the SDR or talking to the AE using Salesforce, or still top-down?
Top-down.
Yeah, I'm just seeing that everywhere.
I wish I could say I get why we go PLG, but also as a salesperson, it can be frustrating, I find. Personally, I think it's good to get It depends on your approach. Like, why are you trying to speak to that user? For me, I wish I could get more referrals, but a lot of the times an AE can't refer me to the VP of sales for a decent size company. And I get it, because there's a lot of people who hit me up hoping for a referral, and I'm just like, look, man, I can't refer for this product or for this solution. So for me, I have that meeting, I get the information that I need, and then I use that in my outreach to book the meeting, and that works very well.
Fine. So research from the research at the bottom, use that research at the top.
Yes. Because
awesome.
If I tell you, Salesforce hygiene is a struggle for you, probably it's great. But what if I told you, hey, I was speaking with one of your reps and they told me that Salesforce hygiene over at your company made it a lot harder for them to ramp up. Now you're listening, right? Yeah.
100%. I love that approach. And it's so interesting because I think your organization would have been could be a case study on if top down or bottom up works. Because it was really like bang in the middle of a product-led growth or a sales-led model, this true sales-assisted model. I really found that super interesting. Listen, I think anyone listening to this would have gotten a lot of value out of it. For the record, we're not endorsed by Apollo. We don't use Apollo, we use Outplay. And the reason we switched to Outplay was many reasons, but one of the main reasons was for international dialing. Apollo's a shocker. And we wanted SMS. We desperately wanted SMS in our cadences, and it's been a game changer for us. But Apollo's a great tool. We love it. Nothing wrong with it. And great businesses have been built on the back of it. Yeah. But it's been a super real pleasure having you on. If somebody wanted to just pick your brain, get hold of you, and discuss these things, like who should reach out to you? First of all, if you want to give your product a plug, like if anyone's having a particular problem, when should they reach out to you?
Yeah, so find me on LinkedIn, Hackston. I'm quite active there. I'm always open for a coffee chat with anybody. Need any help with anything. In terms of what I do, I sell Dually. We help with Salesforce, make it less of a pain in the ass and help your team have better Salesforce hygiene. Yeah, hit me up there.
And we all know better Salesforce hygiene means better data intelligence, better decisions, better processes, better bottom line, better revenue.
That could be a whole different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely a whole different conversation. Most CRMs that I see are just fucking contact data books. They're just very expensive Rolodexes with the salesperson just running their pipeline out of the inbox. But that's a whole conversation for another time. But a spreadsheet would be better than half of the ones I see. Honestly, it would be better.
Yeah.
Mate, really such a pleasure chatting to you, and we'll definitely have a conversation about how you're going as an AE soon.
Thanks, Ricky. Appreciate having me on.